All right, guys, welcome to the weekly roundup. Classes this week are for a refuah shlema in honor and merit of a refuah shlema for Ephraim ben Yosef. So refuah shlema kroiva, I should have a full recovery immediately. Amen. Okay, so this week we're starting this is a very packed week, starting a new parsha. We're starting a new month. We're starting the 9 days. A lot to get to. I will hopefully do a 9 days little something tomorrow. Go back to halacha class, God willing. I make promises and I don't keep them. So I'm not promising, but I'm going to try. This is Devarim, Deuteronomy, which means the second time. Moses is now 37 days away from his passing. It is Rosh Chodesh Shvat, the first day of Shvat. He's going to pass away 37 days later, which is Zayin Adar, which is the seventh day of the month of Adar, which is the reason why, what's his name, was very excited. Haman was very excited that he was going to kill the Jews in the month of Adar because he said, oh, Moses died in the month of Adar. But he forgot that Moses was also born on Zayin Adar. He was born on the month of Adar, same day. When you're born and pass away in the same day, it shows on completeness. Sorry, guys. So this book is presented in a very different way. Moses speaks in the first person, unlike the other four books. So there's a big machlokis, there's a big disagreement. Why does Moses speak? How is this different? Why is it different? So there's a big disagreement. Who is it that the Rebbe argues on? The Maharal of Prague. I believe the Maharal of Prague says that Moses, for the first four books, was like God spoke to him, and then he would give it over. And then the fifth book is Moses understood it so well that he was able to say it in his own words. The Rebbe takes a different approach. The Rebbe says, actually, the first four books of Moses, God spoke as a regular prophet. It's true. But then by the fifth book, Shechina medaberet mitoch grono, this is rooted in the Zohar, that the Shechina, that God actually spoke through Moses' mouth. Moses was so united with God that God actually spoke through Moses. Not that Moses was God. God forbid. We don't believe in that. But he was such a vehicle. He was so one with God that he spoke through him. Okay. Now, where are we holding? We're on the east bank of the Jordan River, about to enter the land of Israel in true Jewish style. The last, as we see by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they admonish their children. They give them strict, whatever, they admonish them, and then they give them blessings. So that's exactly what Moses is going to do. What's interesting about this parsha, though, most mitzvahs are said in this last book. The whole book of Deuteronomy, not just the parsha of Deuteronomy this week, but the next 6 weeks, which is going to take us longer than that. But the next 6 parshias, the next 6 Torah portions are going to be the last 37 days, and we're going to have the most mitzvahs, and we're going to have mitzvahs that were never spoken about. For example, divorce, the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, the mitzvah of Yibum, Chalitza, Levirate marriages. Why didn't we have any of these issues? Now, specifically, why didn't we have the mitzvahs to do with marriage? Or really divorce? We spoke briefly about marriage, but we didn't really speak about divorce. Yibum, you guys know what Yibum is, or Chalitza. Yibum is something that's still practiced. Well, Chalitza is practiced today. If, God forbid, a man's brother passes away, and he was married, and they had no children, and the brother himself is not married, he is to marry his brother's wife, the widow. And she's called the Yavama. And why? So that she could build up his brother's legacy and progeny through the next brother. Now, she has the right to refuse, and it's called chalitza. And that is actually the practice of today. We do not allow for yibum. She cannot marry a brother, but they have to go through this. They have to go through this act. It's a very weird act, if I may say. She has to take off the shoe and spit in the shoe, and she gets kind of embarrassed in a way. You can see them online. The rabbi that usually does them, in my opinion, is not a very kind, if I can say so. I mean, I just think it's kind of ridiculous. Whatever. He doesn't really know how to talk to people. So hopefully you can go to, hopefully that never happens to anybody, but whatever. Well, it's fine. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but whatever. I don't know. I don't really get it. Anyway, you have to do what's called chalitza, and she refuses, and we don't do it that way. However, this wasn't taught until the book of Devarim. Now the question is why. So Nachmanides, 13th century Nachmanides, not Maimonides, but Nachmanides, a couple 200 years later, argues a lot with the Rambam, by the way. He says, during the period, it wasn't Nogeya. It wasn't, the idea of divorce never came up in the last 40 years. Why? Now, we know there were marital problems, but they were always solved. Why? Because we know that when Aaron passes away, Aaron the high priest passed away, the Jewish people mourned for him longer than we mourned for anybody else. What was the big thing? Ohev Shalom, Rodef Shalom. He loved peace. He pursued peace, and he would bring peace specifically, mainly amongst couples. Yeah, they would fight or they had a disagreement, and he'd find a way for them to fall back in love, so to speak. So therefore, divorce was never an issue. It never really came up. We know that before a Rav becomes a Rav, so there's rabbis who know, rabbi basically means we know a lot of laws about kashrus, everyday life, more or less. But then there's more complicated areas of law like contracts, divorce, civil disputes, torts, all these different types of other laws. That's called a Rav. Rabbi Silberberg is a Rav. He's the Rav of the city. So he deals with a lot of high-end stuff. Now, in order for you to get to that level, to get that certification, you have to go through a lot of tests. But more than that, you have to go through like a residency. It's called shimush. You have to be an attending assistant to another Rav, because you have to hear these cases a lot. And you have to be in a situation where you hear them a lot, because that's how you keep up with your knowledge. You have to constantly hear them and be involved in them. So because there was never the issue of divorce, never really happened, we didn't really know much. The Jewish people were about to enter the land of Israel. They didn't really know much about it. So Moses kind of repeated it and taught it again and wrote it down and really, brought it home. And that's really why a lot of these things are repeated, because they had to be, they weren't, out of sight, out of mind. Interestingly enough, though, which mitzvahs are not repeated at all? The mitzvahs that have to do with the Kohanim, anything to do with a Kohen, is not mentioned at all in the entire book of Devarim, Deuteronomy. And that's because it says a Kohen is, he does zrizus, he does mitzvahs with alacrity. They only have to teach them once. Back in the day, they teach them once, you never had to teach them again. So that was okay. Also, you can argue they do it every day, right? The Kohanim, actually, it's not really true. A Kohen who served in the Beis HaMikdash in the temple, sometimes they only served one time in their entire lifetime. They didn't get to do it all the time. Maybe like a couple times, but there would always be like one job. There could be that they did a job and they'll never ever do it again for the rest of their life. They have to give it on to other Kohanim. So that's one reason. It says, actually, the only person, it's very fitting, we're going to the month of Av tomorrow night, which begins the 9 days. When you enter the month of Av, you you lower your outward expressions of joy. So we don't eat meat, we don't drink wine except on Shabbos. So wine and meat are only on Shabbos. We don't go swimming. We don't go to concerts. We don't go to the movies. We actually, in Shulchan Aruch, it says you're not supposed to take a shower. But nowadays, we're all what's called an istinus. We're very particular about being clean. And so therefore, if you really need to, you can do it. Best to take like a lukewarm shower. You don't, I don't know if you cut your nails. Make sure you cut your nails. Good idea. You're not allowed to cut your nails on Rosh Chodesh, by the way. So if you want to cut your nails now. But for 9 days, you can. I don't think we cut our nails because it brings a certain pleasure. Obviously, we don't buy anything. We don't travel. We don't buy anything big that you'd be very, very excited about. You don't travel. There's a few other things that we do. And then obviously the big fast will be on the 9th of Av, which is a 25-hour fast. Actually, in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the longest fast of the year. It's longer than Yom Kippur. It's a little bit harder. It's a pretty hard fast. One of the things, though, it says On the only yard site that's mentioned in the entire Torah is the yard site of Aaron HaKohen. It says he was on the first, he died on the first month, the first day of the second of the fifth month, which is Rosh Chodesh Av. So it's coming up. Tonight is the yard site of Rashi. Also my son's birthday. Who's Rashi's Rab Shlomo Yitzchaki. My son's name is Yitzchak. And maybe we'll speak about him in a moment. But it says when Moses passed away, just to show you how much everyone loved him. It says tens of thousands of Jews named their child Aaron after him. It's one of the, I don't know if it's the earliest. It might be the earliest, but that's the earliest. Certainly one of the earliest sources that we name our child, at least by the Ashkenazim, after someone who's passed. Sephardim do it someone who's alive. Interestingly enough, by the way, also Sephardic, another Sephardic thing that I learned. On a yard site, at least this is by like the Tunisian one, at least Tunisian. Not sure if it's Egyptian or other North African countries. They say the Kaddish, if you have a yard site coming up, they say the Kaddish the entire week before the yard site and not on the day of the yard site. Interestingly enough, if you want to know. Okay, now, okay. Let's see. Okay, so we have the grace after meals is mentioned in this book. And that's why. Why is the grace after Birkat HaMazon, the grace after meals is mentioned? And the reason is, according to the Ramban had a big commentary on the Chumash, as did Rashi. Just to mention one thing about Rashi, once again, Rashi had a lot of grandchildren. And the most famous, or one of the most famous ones, is Rabbeinu Tam, who argues with his grandfather on multiple things. And he says, Rabbeinu Tam said about his father, or grandfather, Rashi had commentary on everything, most things. Now, one of the big things he had it on was the entire Talmud. Not the entire Talmud, most of the Talmud. 60 out of the 64 tractates. I mean, it's tremendous scholarship. He said, I could copy that. I could have, what he did there, I could have done. But what he did in Chumash, I could never do. And nobody, and so could nobody else. Now, the Ramban very often argued on Rashi's comment. I don't know very often, but often argued on Rashi's commentary on the Chumash. Most notably, Rashi says that everything, the Torah is not in any particular order, chronological order, and the Ramban says it is in chronological order, and he goes through all these different loophole, like acrobatics to show you how it is actually in order, but that's not the accepted opinion by the Jewish people. However, the Ramban has some very interesting, there are things that we certainly do accept from the Ramban, and he says, the reason why Birkat HaMazon, the grace after meals, was said now is because all of our food came from heaven. The manna came from heaven. What is Birkat HaMazon? You bless for bread. Bread comes from the earth. We're now going into the land of Israel, where we're going to have to plant and dig and sow and reap wheat. And we're going to have to make bread. So we're going to thank God for bread from the Hamotzi Lechem min haaretz. Thank you, God, for the bread that comes from the ground, from the earth. They actually said back then, Hamotzi Lechem min hashamayim. That was the blessing they would say. Thank you for the bread that comes from heaven. But now they're going to say Hamotzi Lechem min haaretz. This is one of the places Moses actually is going to tell us. He's going to speak about the generation, the previous generation that is not going to the land of Israel, the generation of the spies. These are the children, for the most part. You have the tribe of Levi, a few other exceptions, Kalev and Yeshua. But other than that, it's the next generation. All the previous generation has died out. And he speaks about them and he warns them. But Moses explains over here a different explanation as to why they didn't want to go into the land of Israel. Why didn't those Jews want to go to the land of Israel? And one of the true reasons is because they felt we're not totally spiritually ready to go in there. Let us do a little bit more. There's some more laws that we're going to have to learn about the laws of the land. I mean, you got to think about it. We were going to go, was it going to be like just a week after they left Egypt until they went into the land of Israel? It wasn't a week. Well, a couple of months. It was a couple of months. They didn't feel spiritually ready to go in there. because they're going to have to go. We know that they already knew that the clouds were going to disappear. They knew that they're going to have to work very hard for their bread. They're going to have to fight these nations. They're going to have to get involved in the world, that their mind is not going to be preoccupied with what is right. So they said, let us sit in yeshiva for a little while and let us prepare ourselves properly to enter in. And Moses said no, because God said, no, I told you you would be successful. You're right. It doesn't seem so clear. Your future doesn't seem clear. And in fact, it seems like there's no way you're going to do it. But I'm promising you that you will. If you just keep following the path, you will see it. And they didn't. And that's really why they didn't go in. However, this nation will go in. One of the most famous things that we have in this week's parsha is that Moses teaches, he teaches the Kriya Shema, which is one of my favorite ideas. Why did Moses wait? Now, it's not clear whether he taught the Shema. He might have already taught the Shema 40 years ago, but he emphasizes it now, or he never taught it before. Most opinions say he did teach it before, and now Moses is just, again, Devarim means the second time, and he's emphasizing it a second time, because the line of Shema Yisrael, why did he teach it right now? Because what is the line? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Jewish people, Jews, listen up. Right now, you were operating, for those of you like Kabbalah, this is it, Kabbalah 101, we were operating on the level of Havaya, the higher level name of God. The God, God has different names. That means those are different revelations of himself. Just like you wear different hats in different places you go, you have different names in different places you are. Yeah, and your wife might call you hubby bubby, and then because it's very affectionate and whatever. And then you might have a friend that calls you Scotty boy, and then you go to another place and you're Scott. Yeah, you have different that shows on those different names show on different revelations of you, different, more intimate or less intimate expressions of you. So God also has different levels of expression. Now, the highest level is the level of Yud Ke Vav Ke. Yeah, the letters Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, Hashem. That's the highest level. Now we're going into Israel. God is going to express himself in the way of Elohim, which is hidden. Yeah, a hidden way. Elohim is the same numerical value as Hateva, which means nature, that you're only going to see God within nature. Everything's going to look natural. However, you have to know it's supernatural. What Moses is telling us, Jews, listen, I know you're going to Israel. I'm not even going with you. But the same God that operated here openly with miracles in Egypt and in the desert, Havaya, that level, Hashem, is Elohim. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. They're one person. That's the same, not a person. They're one and the same being. It's just going to take on a different form. So be prepared, and it gave them the strength. He wasn't teaching it to them. The Ramban says he was strengthening them, giving us a blessing that we will see it that way if we take it to heart. Obviously, this very much applies to us now. When we say the Jews are leaving Israel, the desert, and going into the land of Israel, that's a mashal, that's a parable for the real world, the world that you and I live in now. Even though they even had more, they also had miracles at that period of time. But it's the idea of such contrast, like just, things are becoming more and more mibalbel, more and more convoluted, unclear. That's the idea, and you have to work harder to see it. I'm just going down. Let's see over here. Why was the yard site of Aaron mentioned to the exclusion of all other yard sites? To explain that he was Oyev Shalom, Roidev Shalom. He loved peace, and people loved him. So we have to understand it like this. During the times, very interesting. I find this concept to be very interesting, very relevant. During the times, the first temple, we had open prophecy, open miracles. The Urim and Tumim worked. Yeah, that breastplate that gave us prophetic vision and told us whether to go to war or not go to war, that was working. I mean, it was like incredible miracles, but you should know at the same time, even though it was so open, the miracles were so open, murder was at an all-time high, paganism was at an all-time high, idolatry, adultery, like this. Whenever there's very strong times of holiness, holiness means transparency, where God is very revealed, will be on also has together with it very strong times of unholiness, even within the Jewish people. So yeah, right now you'll be diving next to a guy who probably, God forbid, he just like murdered and committed adultery and did all these horrible things, and you're both praying right next to each other. Yeah, even though the Kohen Gadol could be standing next to the most debased, horrible, horrific person. That was very common. And because of that, the first temple was destroyed. And however, when it came to the second temple, paganism was so bad, black magic, for the most part, is accepted as a real thing. It was a real thing, black magic. But the rabbis took away black magic. They said black magic and paganism and idol worship is so strong, the Jewish people cannot handle it. We're going to do something that's going to minimize its strength. Now, however, when you minimize the strength of that, everything in this world gets its energy from kedusha, from holiness, from godliness, everything. So the only way to minimize the strength of something unholy, something that fights against God, so to speak, it's all part of God, obviously, but excuse me, you have to lower its energy source. And therefore, they said, if we're going to get rid of paganism, something else is going to be diminished at the same time. And what was that? Prophecy. Now, it only became diminished. It didn't disappear. You should know that. In Judaism, we don't believe that prophecy completely disappeared, just like we don't believe completely that paganism or idol worship completely disappeared. But it's so weak and it's so few and far between that it's almost negligible. Back in the day, as we've spoken many times, prophecy was much more prevalent. You could become a prophet. You can learn how to become a prophet, but it got minimized. Now, when it came to the second temple, Torah scholarship was at an all-time high. Jews were very frum. We were. It's just actually like today, you know, that there's more Jews studying Torah nowadays than ever in the history of the Jewish people. Now you think, what do you mean godliness is so diminished, yet it brings on it's true, but then it brings on a certain yearning within the soul. People don't even realize it. We're not really in touch with it, but it's pushing us to study more Torah. So actually, Torah scholarship was at an all-time high. Jews were very, very religious, and they had a tough time accepting the fact that the temple got destroyed a second time. The first time we were like, fine, yeah, we get it. We were not so great. And we were warned many times, and we saw that this was going to happen. The second time, we really didn't see it coming. Because we were religious, and we really did try, and we weren't so influenced by the outside world. What happened, everybody remembers, it's sinas chinam. There was baseless hatred. Really two reasons. What is baseless hatred? I find out that you're a Republican or a Democrat, and I say, ugh, I can't believe that's you subscribe to that politics. I hate everything about you now. You say you like Trump or you don't like Trump, whatever. I hate now everything about you. I hate. What do you mean? That's like ridiculous. You don't agree with me on one opinion, therefore you completely cancel me and complete. So the Torah says that's a big no-no. You're not allowed to do that. We don't do that. It's very easy. It's a big trap. We still live within that trap. That's why the rectification for it is to have baseless love, that I accept you for no matter what. Whatever your opinion is, I accept you and I love you and fine. You know, that's the counteract. And Rabbi Akiva's students were killed. Why were Rabbi Akiva's students were killed? So they had a bit of a different issue. The different issue, which is something that we still struggle with now, is that when you think you're right, you want the other person, you want to try to always fix the other person. Yeah, I'm always trying to fix you. They loved each other, but the problem is it brew hatred because they were always trying to fix. Oh, I can show you a better way to do it. Oh, you're not doing it right. You couldn't let go. The person didn't want to change. The person is fine. You know, they were happy with the way it were. We were so stuck on trying to change the other person. It actually created a toxicity. It actually drove the person insane. And the one who was trying to change the other remained fine, but the person that kept hanging on to try to change them, they went crazy and they got angry. And that's like people who are married or in a family of someone who's like an addict. I think that's like a very common thing. Am I wrong? They're always trying to fix them. At a certain point, God says you have to let go. If they're not ready to change, if the person's not ready to hear therapy or take therapy, therapy's not going to work. Yeah, they can go to a therapist, but if they're not ready to listen, or they're not ready to change, they're not going to change. I once, unrelated, but kind of related, I went to where they were selling like CBD, something over here at this local store, and I asked the lady, does it actually work? And she said, if you want it to work, it works. So I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so why does Aaron? I don't exactly know why we got onto this, but we emphasize Aaron nowadays, and Aaron is he ushers in the 9 days, which is the period of time of the destruction of the temple, to remember what he was all about, and that's the solution to our problems. Yeah, Aaron was Ohev Shalom, he loved peace, Roidev Shalom, and he always pursued peace, he always tried to make peace. That's the solution to the 9 days. That's why we emphasize him so much. That's why one of the reasons why his yard site falls out at the beginning or right before a horrible downfall. God always gives the solution to the remedy for the sickness before the sickness comes. Moving on, I'm just looking through the parsha. Yeah, okay. We spoke about that. Oh, interesting. You want to know something interesting? For those that for those of you that were tefillin, so what's the difference between the top tefillin, the head tefillin, and the arm tefillin? If you look, you'll see the top tefillin have 4 compartments, with the 4 different parshias that talk about the Shema and the leaving of Egypt. However, on the arm tefillin, basically the same thing is written on it, but all in one paragraph. The head tefillin are in 4 different compartments, separated, while the arm is on one paragraph. So the Maharal of Prague explains, 16th century Maharal of Prague, who created the golem, the big monster that's still alive. That represents the first 4 books of the Torah, corresponds to the first 4 books of the Torah. Those were the Jews that lived in the land where God, in the Midbar, they left Egypt. God was open and revealed. So the head tefillin are always revealed. However, the arm tefillin represents the Jews. That's the 5th book of the Torah, all packed in one, compartment. It's all packed in one big book. You wear it on the arm, but it's always covered. You should always cover the arm tefillin, and that represents the Jews that were going to the land of Israel. That godliness is is all beneath the surface. It's gonna have to work a little harder. It's all there. It's all there, and actually, it's in a way that you can even understand it even greater. Moses, it says in this week's parsha, and if you look inside my Instagram story, it's the question of the day. It says that Moses, on verse number 5, says Moses began to explain the Torah. So Rashi explains, what do you mean he began to explain the Torah? He's been explaining the Torah for 40 years. Rashi explains that he began to translate it into 70 languages. Translated into the 70 languages. Why 70 languages? Everybody spoke Hebrew. And he said that's because it's not just for the generation then, but it's for all generations. And the idea is, what Moses was telling us, is that you have to explain the Torah in a way that's relevant. Devarim means a second time, speak to yourself a second time. Whatever you learn, apply it to your life. Think about this. How is this relevant in my life? Everything that we learn should be relevant in our lives, in our personal lives, not just to have a good saying or good speech, but speaks to me. So Moses is explaining the 70 languages. Now the Arizal, the yard site, is actually coming up on the 11th. When's the Arizal yard site? Anybody know? Okay, let me know. It's this week's I think it's the Shabbos. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, I'm not sure. I forgot. It's this week though. The Arizal explains that the 70 languages correspond to the 70 nations. Everything in this world has a spark of holiness, we call it a spark, a nitzos, which means a revelation of godliness, the godly life force that's buried within the physical element, and our job is to reveal that by using it out for its actual purpose. You have a physical item, it should be used out in a godly way, and that releases the spark, that releases the godly, it reveals the godliness within. Now, that's not just for physical items, that's anything in creation, which means even thoughts. Yeah, you have thoughts that are stuck. You have to use out your thoughts for a positive way. Emotions have to be used out in a positive way. Past experiences have to be used out in a kosher, holy way. And he said what Moses was doing, he was preparing these sparks. He was making it easier for the future generations to uplift these, to reveal these sparks, all the different nations that were going to come, Jews, non-Jews, everything like this, to reveal it. Something very interesting about the Arizal. The Arizal was not just a regular Joe Schmo, by the way. He wasn't just any holy site that we know in Israel, before the Arizal, it wasn't marked. We didn't really know where Rachel was buried. I think even Mars Machpelah, where Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, we didn't know really, I don't think with 100% certainty where it was. We didn't know where, a lot of other things, many, many things. He's the one that went around and said, this is where it is, using prophecy. And it became accepted amongst all of the Jewish world. Ashkenazi, Sephardi, the most skeptical, everybody accepted it. And that's how we know. Just an interesting point. It's already very late. Interesting point. Everyone thinks that the Holy of Holies is by the Dome of the Rock. Yeah, that's usually when you go to the Kotel, you go to the Western Wall. Everyone says the Holy of Holies is by where the Dome of the Rock is. Why do they think why the Dome of the Rock? So underneath the dome, that mosque thing over there, it's not really a mosque. I don't know what it is. There's a big rock, and it says Evan Apin. I forgot the lesson, or I forgot the language. But it says that in the Holy of Holies there was a rock, and that was the rock that the world was created from. So the Arizal says no, actually. The Kodesh HaGadoshim, the Holy of Holies, is actually right in front of where we daven, pray at the Western Wall. That's where the Holy of Holies was. So you are actually, you go in those tunnel tours, like, oh, here, you're in the closest spot to the Holy of Holies. So according to the Arizal, no, right? If you walk in the middle of the Western Wall, that is the holiest spot. Meaning just on the other side. Just on the other side. You can't get any closer to the Holy of Holies than you are over there. So if we accept Arizal in one area, we should accept him, I would assume, on all areas. But maybe that's not true because we don't do it with the Ramban. I'm not sure. Okay, I actually have to stop here. Does anybody have any questions? I apologize for the delay. Anybody here? Everybody good? Any questions? Vilma, yeah. Sorry.
It was very relatable what you said about applying it to our lives, because Gadal Fencer just I posted that on my Instagram. He says that as well. The Breslau's believe that everything that you learn should be entered into your heart and processed. You guys believe in the mind and the heart connection in a different way, but they're saying the same thing.
Yeah, for sure.
You need to apply it. The wisdom needs to be in you.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, relevant. Yeah, exactly. Mishnah Torah means Devarim. Another word for Deuteronomy or Devarim is Mishnah Torah, the second time, saying the Torah a second time. So the tradition is, this is not like a Hasidic thing. The tradition is that you say it a second time, so that, meaning for yourself. Yeah, you apply it to yourself. One little interesting thing, because we're speaking about Shema and speaking about applying it to ourselves. When you say the Shema in Shulchan Aruch, I don't think we ever got to this. You should say like this. You say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and then you guys know that we move our heads like this. You move your head like this, all the directions, and then you move it frontwards and backwards. Why do you move it frontwards and backwards? For all the directions, but backwards, when you go like this, you should apply it to yourself. Yeah, all the directions, including yourself. Yeah, the idea, the concept of Shema Yisrael, that's our mantra. Yeah, anybody who does transcendental meditation, you always need a mantra. I don't know if it's kosher or not, TCM, but I think it is. Anyway, the mantra of the Jewish people is saying of the Shema, and you should apply it to ourselves. Yeah, okay. Just wanted to give a little halacha there. Okay. Who else? Anybody have any other questions? Yeah, Moshe, what's up, man?
It also said, I believe it's the Zohar. The Zohar also says that we should also concentrate on uniting the name of UK Vav K while we say the Shema.
Yeah, that's why every mitzvah. Is it specifically Shema? The upper level hey and the lower level hey, for sure.
Yeah.
The things with the kavanot, what you're talking about, kavanot, those are if you could do it. I always found it very challenging to try to do that. You know what I mean?
Zohar says a lot. It even says to concentrate on the 70 nations while you're saying Shema.
That makes sense. Because the whole, all of creation, basically. All directions means all of creation, any part of creation. The upper, the spiritual parts, the physical parts, the lower parts, the southern parts. For sure. the people, the real Hasidim who say Shema, they'll say Shema and they sit there for like a minute. They'll say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Echad, and they'll just sit there for a long time thinking about it. So that's actually what it means to be marich. It says you should elongate the echad. Echad is echad. Yeah, that God is one. To be marich, to elongate, to meditate upon the echad. That's what it means. To don't actually say the word echad for a long time. Echad, which is actually the wrong way to do it. That's actually not how you should say it. You being marich, to elongate on the word echad, which means one, that God is one, is to think about how God is one with everything. That everything is merely an expression of God. They're really all one entity.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta go. But thank you guys very much. Should be class tonight. Rambam, Women's Tanya, and we have a very new and exciting program coming up, which I will explain, a certification program. So if you guys want a certificate signed by some big rabbis, we're gonna get that going. But other than that, I'll see you. Hopefully tomorrow I'll give a halacha class, God willing. All right. Peace and love, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.